Yeah. All right, so what we'd like to do once again is utilize this time for, instead of a type of shiurim that we're giving, just have like what we've been calling a discussion, which is to make a lot of assumptions on the part of the listener. Sorry?
It's broadcasting?
Yeah, it's broadcasting. I forgot to record that. So this is a format that makes much more demands on the part of the listener, but on the other hand, it's more efficient in terms of time, and it's the only format we can use when we haven't had enough time to really prepare a formal presentation. So we'd like to go over in brief some of the very important inyanim that came up in this year on Parshas Lech Lecha over Shabbos in Menachem Tzion. So you remember the format that we've been using as of late is to first go through the Ptuchot and Stumot and to utilize the Ptuchot and Stumot while we go over them in terms of just structuring to come to actually touch on many of the problems that subsequently we'll be able to address in the discussion. So let me do that first. So we open up with our opening Ptucha, which is the what appears to be just a general introduction. Again, when I'm going to talk about structure, I'm going to really ignore the way that people would generally read this. Generally, this would be introduced. People would say, this is the Nisayon of Lech Lecha. And the Lech Lecha is together promises what will happen to you if there will be a Lech Lecha. And then it talks about the fact that there was a Lech Lecha, and that Avram was walking all the way up to Shechem, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Avram, and he promised him Zarachat and Taretz Hazot, and the binyan of the Mizbeach. However, I think, as we shall see, that's not the correct way to look at this opening parasha. It isn't merely, as a matter of fact, it turns out not even to be at all, in a sense, just the description of the Nisayon, what the Rambam calls the Nisayon of Gerut, or the Nisayon of Galut, depending on the gears that you have, that was given to Avraham. But rather, it ends up being a introductory parsha that actually subsumes the entire structure of the Sedra. So that, as we shall see, the Sedra itself reflects the three issues that are mentioned here in that opening parsha, which is the V'yazkel Gadol, V'yavorecha V'gadol Shemecha V'yibracha. Those particular brachas, which Rashi defines as because of the fact that the derech is mima'etet shloshet dvarim, so it's mima'etet the ability for a person to make any money. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to give him the bracha of Va'avarecha in terms of Ruchush. And then, because it's Mama'etis is Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to give him the bracha of Agadla Shemecha. Because generally, if you're moving from place to place, you're unable to attain any kind of powerful reputation in any place. There's simply not the time to become successful enough in that location for people to identify you in that way. And then, the Goy Gadol, it's certainly Mimayetet Piryaver if it's difficult to engage in reproductive activities while you're on the road. And generally speaking, people, of course, are sort of careful not to reproduce on the road. It's a very, very difficult thing in terms of carrying a child on the road, delivering a child on the road. So because of that, the derech is normally Mamayet Shloshet Dvarim, and therefore, says Rashi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll be Mavarch you with these Shloshet Dvarim. As we shall see, and this is, on the surface, an absolutely outrageous explanation, which of course is based on Chazal. There's no possible way to be outrageous, but it appears to be on the surface an outrageous explanation of why these three brachot, considering, as we shall see, that the entire rest of the parsha is merely an expansion on these three brachot until they lead finally to the idea of Vayeh Bracha, which is the change in Avram Avinu's name. in which he becomes the Av Hamor Goyim. And the idea of the V'nivrachu b'chol kol mishpachot ha'adama is that idea of Av Hamor Goyim, the Tatichas. Everybody's going to be able to take their own identity out of what it is that you become. So, as we'll see, the story of this Sedra is the story of this opening short Tucha. We'll have to come back to understand how in the world Rashi could possibly justify saying what he does. Now, the next Tucha talks about, and again, from a childish point of view, which is the way most people read the Parsha, from a childish point of view, the next Parsha is about the exciting story, the outrageous story, the ridiculous story of Avram doing everything wrong. First of all, as the Ramban says, leaving Eretz Yisrael, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him this is where he's supposed to be, and making that into, because there's a Ra'av, so because of that he leaves Eretz Yisrael, does a terrible sin. Well, that's the sheet of the Zohar. We don't find it really anywhere else, but that's how the Ramban follows it. And then the crazy idea of giving your wife over to Paro is all very nice to say, because otherwise they'll kill me. But, that's not what he says. He says, that if you'll do that, so then L'man yitavli ba'avurech. How in the world do you say L'man yitavli ba'avurech in the context of Hargo Tiva Tachi Chayu? It's a little bit strange. Are you looking to save your life, or are you looking to, as Rashi says, Bavur Yitanuli Matanot? Is this? It's like weird to say, and while we're at it, saving my life, I might as well make some money off the deal. So why you have to tell them anyway that you're my sister in order for me to survive? What are you talking about? In order that they should give me matanot? It doesn't even make any sense. All right, but whatever. So this is the exciting story. So Avram Avinu seems to be making a fool of himself, degrading his wife, going down to Paro. And yes, exciting end, of course, of Hanaga Hashem with Paro. And then we have a non sequitur. The non sequitur is that he gets into a fight with Lot. What in the world does that have to do with this? Why isn't that in a separate parsha? So obviously, the real topic of the parsha has almost nothing to do with the story of the parsha in a sense. The real topic of the parsha is the first introduction that we had before, which was that the Haftarah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Avavrech, and that Avarech, as Rashi says, is the Mama. You will be rich. The topic of this parsha is money, ruchush, on every level. So the reason that the part about Lot is in there is because Ruchusham Rav. It's because they had so much ruchush, and therefore it's introduced with V'gam Lulot Haolechet Avram Yatzon Uvakar V'Oalim Ki Haya Ruchusham Rav, and therefore when it says Avram Kaved Mod B'Mikneh B'Kesef V'Vazahav, this request that Avram had originally made, Aman Yitavli, that they will give him matanot, is his own involvement in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Haftarah to him that he will be rich. And indeed, even in the next section, which we'll have to see why it extends into the next section, but even in the next section, we find that Rechush, of course, plays also a central role. So the Melech Sodom tells Rechush, Kach Avram Avinu says, never, I will not take your rechush. And because of that, the whole war, which is built around rechush, now comes into the fore, because it says he took Lot's rechush, and then we know that the Medrash says that was the main idea, is that why would they tapel to this whole war? Because they were trying to get at Avram through getting at Lot. And then he saves the rechush. The value and centrality of the rechush is stressed by the fact that, in contradistinction to the Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's own Musar to Bnei Menashe, in which they make what again, the Torah claims is the absurd statement that, we're very worried about the Gidrot son, and by the way, we'll also make a place for our children, to survive. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, that is crazy. I mean, the first thing you got to think about is your children and your wives, And over here, it's exactly what the Torah itself says. So it says that when Avram Avinu went, he won the war, and Vayoshev et kol rechush. Oh, and by the way, v'gam et hanashim ve'et ha'am. And the nashim ve'et ha'am, v'gam, which puts the central, comes only after the other v'gam. Because v'gam et lo tachiv rechusho, eshib. So you have two rechushes, and then the nashim et ha'am. So if you're trying to tell me that the rechush is not the centerpiece, I don't know how it is you're going to explain all of this. Okay, so it's clear, therefore, that even over there, the bracha that is given, Baruch Avram Eloyah, is also part of this bracha that has to do with rechush, and the idea that I will not take your rechush, but I'll take, as Rashi says, I won't take your rechush because HaKadosh Baruch Hu already promised me that He's going to make me rich. What do I need your rechush for? So it's even referring back consciously in the parsha itself to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yivtiach li, where Yivtiach li, in the opening psukim. What do I need your rechush for? So for Rashi, you know what this rechush is, you understand. Does it sound familiar? That Avram has rechush gadol here? Yeah, darn right it does. Because that's the whole of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So you went down to Mitzrayim, there's rechush gadol. This becomes now this meta-historical rechush gadol that becomes the rechush that has to be brought back to Mitzrayim in order to be sufficient rechush, so that Yosef has to be toreach all of those decades in order to get all that rechush back. And kol kesef v'zahav shebekol olam kulu, the Gemara says Pesachim, Yosef was toreach and brought it all to Mitzrayim in order to be mekayim de'achreich and yetzu rechush gadol of Klal Yisrael. I mean, what is this, just like a coincidence? It happens to be Avram did everything wrong, of course, but Ma'asav v'simon l'banim, so that in the end they should get rechush. Right. Okay, so clearly the topic is specifically rechush. The fact that the modality of attaining that rechush happens to be through what appears to be weird, and that the actual biggest rechush that is part of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is the Acharei Chen Yetzu Rechush Gadol, is following the Vayisham Lagoy. The Vayisham Lagoy takes place in the property that is given to Sora as a gift, which was Eretz Goshen. So that means the entire Yetzias Mitzrayim appears over here, all in terms of rechush, which not only is rechush gadol Mitzrayim, but as the Gemara says, continues on throughout all of the Malchios, all of the which was also part of this parasha, until it finally comes back to Klal Yisrael at the end of the years. And meanwhile, it's in the final stage of Golus, which is the Golus of the Rome. So therefore, it's Adaini Baromi, as the Gemara says, it's still stuck over there in Rome anyway. Yeah, it's downstairs. No, it doesn't work. It's broken. Moshe, it doesn't work. He has to learn this because every time he interrupts the shir. Tell him he cannot do this anymore. So that means that what we're talking about is rechush that is chovek olamot. It goes across the entire history. And Rashi is saying, because it happens to be that during this period that Avram is going on the road, so he's going to have a hard time making money. So obviously, Rashi cannot mean what he's saying in the Parshat Law. Okay, so that's chelik number one. We move on to the third stuma. The third stuma, I'm sorry, Ptucha. The third Ptucha opens with, in its first part, the kiyum of the very next thing. The very next thing is the promise that Avram was told, V'agad Lashemecha. So the Agad Lashemecha of course, means that he will become famous. There is no greater fame than the description here of Emek Shaveh. Now, everybody, again, the childish reader will say, this third section is about the war, the exciting war that Avram fought. No, it's not about the exciting war. It's about the kiyum of the Haftorah v'Kadosh Baruch Hu Hagadla Shemecha, which is achieved by none other than Shem himself. Who else can give over Shemecha if it isn't Shem? So it's covered by Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem, who is Shem, of the primal Shem, that is Yotze, from the previous Asar Dares. Amazingly, this means that the entire world is recognizing the Hagadla Shemecha of Avram Avinu, and therefore we come to a matzav of Emek Shaveh, in which Emek Shaveh is Hushvu Kol Umot Kulam, and they've decided they have to be Melech Avram Avinu in the entire world. There's nobody that is right to be more famous, more powerful. That's Hagadla Shemecha. The fact that it happens to be through this war that Hagadla Shemecha takes place is all very nice, but that's like saying that the previous parsha was about the story of Sarah and Parah, when in fact it wasn't about anything like that. It was about the attainment of the concept of Rechush Gadol. So again, we have the introduction. Please take a seat over there. So we have the introduction. You have to memorize how to get in. You have to stop calling in the middle of the shoot. It's very easy to memorize that. So, what? No. I mean, this is the 10th time you've been here. Keeping secrets from you.
No, it's very simple.
Okay. Yes, very simple. Okay. So again, we have our opening, which is basically the subsuming parsha that is going to include everything that happens in the context of the parsha. Then we have the kiyum of the Rechush Gadol. Then we have the kiyum of Hagadla Shemecha, which is essentially achieved by Shem. The fact that Avram Avinu says that I will not take Mechut Vatzruch from you is in fact in this parsha because it is Nogea the way that Rechush Gadol itself is Nogea Shem. So therefore, I will not allow you to ever be mamayet my fame by claiming Ani Heshat Yet Avram. So it's actually part of the Hagadla Shemecha in defining what Rechush is acceptable to me and what Rechush is not. We also define the nature of that Rechush Gadol, which takes us back to the beginning, in which the Yitzia of Avram Avinu to be Mekayim, the original Lech Lecha, it says Beferish over there, Ve'et kol rechusham asher rechashu. This is even before we have the kiyum of that rechush, which means that we're bedavka contrasting the initial rechush, which was near Chashai de Avram, and we are contrasting that rechush with the idea of the rechush that has been given to me specifically by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kvar Yiftichani. This rechush that I achieve on my own is insufficient, and we'll see. And actually, there's a much more profound way of understanding this relationship of the rechush to a medity of the parsha to be discussed in a moment. But let's say we take it now that we even contrast the original rechush, and therefore, because of that, after having achieved this rechush through Paro, which becomes the Rechush Gadol that will be achieved ultimately by Klal Yisrael as a whole, then we can move on to say, okay, but this is the other rechush is not the rechush that I'm interested in. I will not take anything of it because it itself, as Moshe has suggested, it itself will damage the Hagadla Shemecha. Not to mention the fact that the very chutzpah that you have of offering the rechush to me, which is outrageous. Don't tell me what I can take and what I can't take, you chutzpaniak. I saved your life and everything that you own, and you're making conditions with me? The very fact that you are so outrageous as to think that you should even discuss it with me means that I cannot take a penny of it because you're so stupid that the end result is you're going to say, see, I gave him the rechush. Whereas any idiot would understand after there, you didn't give me a darn thing. But somebody like you, it's begetter, as we say afterwards, Lama Yamra Goyim. Whereas HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Zimlo kas oyev agur, ben yomru. That's what you're doing. So I don't want to have any shaykhs to it. If such a issue is considered to be a chilul hashem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's kosher chilul hashem of the Gad Lasherecha. And because of that, I cannot take it. Mamela, it appears in that parsha, which is part of the kiyum of the second chelik of the Haftacha, which is the Agad Lasherecha. So Rechush begins because Rechush itself is part of the Agad Lasherecha in the end. The next parsha, which is here mechuber as a parsha stuma to what we just had, achar hadivarim ha'eleh, and therefore it relates directly to the war. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avram, Anochi mogen lach, secharcha harbe ma'od, and Avram says, Adonai Elohim atiten li, Anochi olech ariri. Now, there's a couple of strange things that are involved over here. I mean, at the beginning of the parsha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Vayira lav yom l'zaracha atenet haaretz hazot, vayiven sham mizbeach l'Hashem anirai lav." Why is he vayiven sham mizbeach al b'surat haaretz v'al b'surat hazera? Right? Yeah, Moshe, is that the lashon?
Well, by the
What was he vayiven sham mizbeach? What does Rashi say? Two things, right? I understand, but how does he have the B'surat HaZerah at that point? And then only later, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if he's already accepted the fact that he's going to have Zerah, so later on, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and says to him, Sechachar Be'mod, as a result, he has to say to him, why does he have to say this? Because, again, as Chazal tells and as Rashi brings, he's frightened, right? He's worried about the fact, that's why it says, Al Tirah, don't be worried. What is he worried about? He's worried about the fact that he should be the one that has created the First World War. Me, the great guy, is always taking care of people, so I'm going around killing people, opening up the door to world wars. Because the system, don't be worried about that, right? So, because of that, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, now he has a petach. So he's telling him, you don't have to worry. On the contrary, you'll have a lot of schar. Now, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you that you had a lot of schar, what would you think? You think, oh my God, what amazing. I was just so an incredible chelik in Olam Haba, Baruch Hashem. Avram Avinu, of course, he doesn't believe any of this. I mean, it's a bunch of garbage. Why else is he saying, God, you can't give me anything? It's such an insane statement in your life. You say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't give me anything. What are you talking about? I don't care what you give me. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. How many millions and millions of people went through life without having any children? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kol Hashem l'sarisim asher yad v'shem. Wonderful. Avram Avinu v'shemer Shabbos, like it says, Asher Shamur Shabtotai, that's the, right? I mean, that's what he was shamer, even the dinim of Erevin. So, I mean, what's the problem? Don't worry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't worry. It's okay. You'll have B'beiti v'chomotai, Yad v'shem, Tov b'banim u'b'banot. But that he can't tell Avram. He says, you're 100% right, except you're all mixed up. There's no problem. Why wouldn't you have any children? It's unbelievable. So that doesn't make any sense, right? And of course, in that context, as we pointed out many times, to say that the problem is that Eliezer, my Eved, is going to be Yorish me is one thing. But to say domestic Eliezer is going to be Yorish me is nuts. Because Chazal say, why is he called domestic Eliezer? Because he's Dolo Umashke Mitoros Rabba La'achirin. So if he's Dole Umashke, that means he was Sholeit, as we see later on, the Kol HaShalom. So he had all of Avram Avinu's Torah, and he was able to teach all of Avram Avinu's Torah, and says Avram is a disaster. This idiot is the one that's going to be Yorish me, the one who knows all of my Torah. I mean, the context doesn't make any sense. Why is he in the place to say domestic Eliezer? You want to point out he's an Eved, to say he's an Eved, right? That's a problem. Because he believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then, again, we have another Avtacha. And here we have the horrible story of B'mayda Ki Rashena, which becomes the Emar Chashicha Gedola Nofelat Alav, which is very suspicious, because, I mean, it certainly is presented over here as a response to B'mayda Ki Rashena, whereas as Chazal tell us, in fact, Ma'aseh Bereshis itself consisted of each one of those words was connected. One of these words. One was connected Bovel, one was connected Mitzrayim, one was connected Bovel, one was connected Yovan, Modai. I mean, it's exactly the same things. So it's just like the story that the Adam Rishon says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I love it. I love it. You make up your mind. You prepared maves all over the world, And now I'm the one that's going to get blamed for it, as if I created the whole thing. Here, the whole Ma'aseh Bereshis requires this development and history of all of these Malchiyos, but I'm going to get blamed for it because I opened up my big mouth and I said, "B'mayda Ki Rashena." It's Yodoah Teda. Oh, you don't know? Okay, we'll teach you a lesson. Yodoah Teda, Ker Yezerecha. Okay, fine. That itself is a problem, and of course, the problem itself is introduced again in the context of this parsha, which we are claiming is the kiyum of the next part, which is, after telling me that there's rechush and after telling me there's shame, v'eschel goy gadol. The v'eschel goy gadol, of course, has to involve zera. In which case, Avram Avinu says, "Well, lo natata li zera." So, what are we talking about? Schachar be'ma'od. Which means that Avram Avinu has defined everything that he's doing in the context of that opening parsha, in which, look, we have nothing to talk about unless we're dealing with these three inyanim. So obviously, it's not shayach to say what Rashi is saying. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a person whose entire vision of what he is supposed to be achieving in life has been completely restructured in a way that a normal person would never open his mouth to say, so therefore I have nothing to give me. Shem Yishmor, nothing to give me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has nothing to give me. Life is nothing to give me. Artzot HaChaim is nothing to give me. What is that supposed to be, Bislam? But to him, there is nothing to give me because I only think in meta-historical terms. So Mela, a rechush that will not become the rechush gadol of Mitzrayim, a bracha that does not become the kiyum of an agadla shemech l'dores, in which case there's zera, is meaningless. So I understand. Apparently the whole idea is broken down. So here we have this inyan of the bris bein abesarim, and the final is arachanat adet taretz azot, and we have the vision of even of David HaMelech over here, which is the beginning of next week's parsha, which we talk about Sodom V'Amorah and the Hatzalah of Lot, the Poretna, and the development of the Shtei Predot, of course, being Rus and the Hama Ammonit, and all of that happens directly at the closing of our parsha, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them there will be kings. Malchei Amim, these are the Malchei Amim that we have to talk about, and we go directly into the next week's parsha. So again, the impact of these opening brachot define not merely every last bit of this parsha, but every bit of the end of history, until Bias HaMashiach, which makes the inyan of Rashi even crazier. But at this point, let's note a couple of interesting things. First of all of the future developments that are in this parsha that basically describe two levels of the V'eschel goy gadol. And why do I say two levels? Because remarkably, Yishmael is also called a goy gadol. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Yishmael shmaticha, and unetativ l'goy gadol. But that was the Haftacha, right? That's what the original Haftacha was. Ve'esche l'goy gadol. So ve'esche l'goy gadol became two goy gadols. First, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, well, the real goy gadol, I mean, I'm talking about, you're going to have Sarah, Yishtecha is going to be giving you a child, and it's going to be unbelievable. He's going to be so powerful. And then, because Avram Avinu says, Lu Yishmael Yechiel Lefanecha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, the real guy is Yitzchak. But okay, fine. Secondarily, I'll listen to you about Yishmael, since you seem to care about this idiot. Okay, so he'll also be a Goy Gadol. Goy Gadol on the right, Goy Gadol on the left. So that means the entire parsha is in terms of Goy Gadol. And yet somehow all of those parshas are mechuber to the general heading that begins with the story of Anochi Mogen Loch. Now, remember that Anochi Mogen Loch actually is the hashlama of the first bracha of Shmoneh Esrei, Mogen Avraham, which ends with the bracha of the Haftarah, Mogen David, is the one, which is exactly what's happening over here, from Mogen Avraham to Mogen David, and that becomes Ve'esche. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "V'tati lo Shem gadol kishem hagedolim asher ba'aretz zeh shomrim Mogen David." So that's why Gadol Shemecha includes here the Haftacha of the equivalent growth into the Shlemus, the very thing that is Merumas, exactly over here, because what happens? The vulture comes down and starts eating the pieces. And Avram says, "Oh, shoot, go away." So as Rashi tells us, who is the vulture? That's David. So David says, "No, it's too early for this, right? We have to wait, because what is he doing? He's eating carrion. These are all dead ducks anyway. So we'll just clear the world of all of this garbage, and we're carrying 21 hours. That's exactly what we do. It's unbelievable. Like the actors of the Inyanim and from again Avram to Mogen David. But not only that, it's not at the end of the bracha that appears over here. The introduction to the Anochi Mogen and the Schachar Be'ma'od is Baruch Avraham La'el Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz. Did you ever hear those words before? Yeah, every Shmoneh Esrei. Eloi Avraham, Eloi Yitzchak. All of these things, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Konei. This is Elyon. What is Elyon doing? Whoever speaks about it, in our brachas we say Elyon. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, not Elyon. Eloi Avraham, Eloi Yitzchak, Eloi Yaakov. So this becomes Elyon in the Shmoneh Esrei. Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, Mogen Avraham, taken directly from here. Astounding. But what Chazal tell us the meaning of that Mogen Avraham is that goes back to the original opening of the Parsha. Ve'esche l'goy gadol means, this is the idea that we're going to make a bracha of Elokei Avraham. Avorecha Elokei Yitzchak. Agad Lashemech Elokei Yaakov. Yocho Yachtamu B'kulam. Tamid Lomar Ve'yeh Bracha. Zeh Shomrim Mogen Avraham. So the opening of the Parsha also subsumed this piece of the story, which is there will be a Shmoneh Esrei that will include the inyanim of this Parsha, b'diuk in terms of the way that we just presented the opening of Lech Lecha. That's crazy. But the deeper meaning of it is also Yocho Chotmim B'kulam, Talmud Lomar, Ve'yeh Bracha, B'cha Chotmim V'lo B'kulam. Means what? That all of the interim issues are meant to be subsumed in the finality of a Mogen Avraham that occurs here before, not after. Now, that itself leads us to some other very serious problems. The very serious problems are that the real answer to the question that I asked you before of if he already built a Mizbeach Hashem HaNirei Lav al B'surat HaZerah al B'surat HaAretz. Why in the world is he saying Mati Teli? The incredibly surprising answer is that the opening of the Parsha took place 5 years later than the events in the later part of the Parsha. In fact, the entire Parsha is backwards. And the entire Parsha, because of that, is something of a joke. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avram Avinu, I want to give you an Isayan. You're just going to start walking until I tell you to stop. You have no idea where you're going. El ha'aretz asher ar'eka. The next words are, so vayikach Avram et Sarai ishto lalechet arza Canaan. Wait a second, what do you mean? How do you know you're going to lalechet arza Canaan? I didn't tell you yet. Hey, what? Why are you going to look at that? I told you to wait until I tell you where to go. And what does he do? Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad makom Shechem ad Elon Moreh. What does that mean? Says Rashi, this occurs later on again. He's coming from Paro and he goes back to Hanegba. Right? Hanegba. What is Hanegba? Vayelech l'masa'av ad hamakom asher haya sham betchilah. As Rashi points out, kol masa'av hayu lekivun Har HaMoriah, which is Hanegba. Kivun Har HaMoriah. Yes, because Baruch is going to tell him the final lech lecha. Lech lecha al eretz HaMoriah. V'sham al achad ha'arim asher omar elech. But I'm not going to tell you now, because we want to be magdil v'nisayon. So, what does he do? Does he go eeny, meeny, miny, mo? No. He goes to Har HaMoriah, of course, because that's where I've been my whole life. I've been looking for this place, and I keep going on Negba in order to get here. So, let me guess, what har might that be? I wonder. El ha'aretz asher ar'eka. If you make an analysis, points out the Seder Olam, it points out Taisus in a number of places. The opening of the Parsha has Avram being 75 years old. But the Gemara makes a clear analysis on, and it says over here, the number of years. Shva'asrei Shana do it, all of that analysis. Why is that there? To enable us to work backwards to the Dora Palaga and to understand that we were talking about 52 years that were involved here, which means that Avram Avinu must have been 70 years old at the time that he got the bracha of the Brit Ben Abitarim, and at the time of the Milchama of the Malachim, he was 73 years old, which means Parsha begins with Avram at 75, pretending to be telling him something that he couldn't imagine what that would be. So Tosfos says, well, I don't know, must be that he made a bunch of pilot trips there to Israel on his own. And indeed, as it says in the Eliyahu, Moshe, he was walking all over the world, looking for the place to build a new world. And every place that he went, he saw a bunch of hedonistic idiots. Until he comes to Sulba Tzur, which is today's Rosh HaMikra, and he sees intelligent people investing in the land, putting in what they need to put in this season, doing everything necessary for the next season, not wasting their time. And he says, this should be the land I wish I could settle in. Because Baruch Hu says to him, deal. He is then 70 years old. Goes back to Haran. And only when he's 75 does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say to him, I have a big surprise for you, but I'm not going to tell you. I want you to go to a certain place. Gee, okay. And he goes to the place without being told where to go. Right? This is crazy. So he goes to the place, and then we get to the exciting episode which occurred 2 years before with the Milchemes HaMelachim. And then we get to the bris, in which the bris Ben Abitarim took place 3 years before that. 3 years before that. So we go from Avram at 75 to Avram at 73 to Avram at 70. So as Tosfos speaks out the Fairs, despite the fact that it sure sounds like after the Mecheves HaMelachim, Avram says, well, what are you going to give me? Okay, I'm going to give you Zerah. And I'm going to give this country to your Zerah. B'meida Kirashena. No. The B'meida Kirashena took place actually 3 years before the pasuk that took place, the previous pasuk. So the previous pasuk, which is Vayamin Ba'Hashem Vayachshevelo Tzedakah, he was 73 years old. The next pasuk, which pretends to be the next words in the conversation, had already taken place 3 years earlier. So the entire parsha is backwards. In other words, not only is the parsha a joke, because it pretends that he doesn't know when he does perfectly well know, but it's also even written backwards to perpetuate the joke. Because, I mean, if we really knew what happened, we'd say, what? That's crazy. So to hide it from us, and as Rashi says, the whole thing is written in a way to hide it from us. Why? Because really, when Avram left, his father hadn't died. We're 60 years left, but it doesn't want us to know that. As Baruch said, leave your old father behind. So it pretends that it took place before. So the whole thing from the beginning to the end is completely anti-chronological from the beginning of the story. What is more, the other thing that is backwards, is that the Lech Lecha, which defines here Nisayon Rishon and Nisayon Achar, you could, if I'm leaving out something, please, you can tell me. I see that you're frustrated about something. No, okay. The Lech Lecha, which represents the son Rishon in Nisayon Achar, Rashi has already told us that the real darga of Avram Avinu is not Lech Lecha. The real darga of Avram Avinu that differentiates him from the previous Asara Deres is Hisalech Lefanai. Hisalech Lefanai occurs only at the end of the parsha. So that means even that is, in a sense, out of order, because he only achieves the real meaning of his halicha, and the difference in his halicha, which is the essential point, says Rashi, about all of the difference between the Dorot HaRishonim of 10 generations and the beginning of Alpayim Torah of Avram Avinu is this difference. Is it Hitalech Lefanai or is it Et Elohim Hitalech Mo? You know, I just thought for many years I've discussed and written that issue, what Rashi could possibly mean, related it to the Rambam, about how qualitative differences make all the difference in the world. And you cannot measure one set which exists within one space, so to speak, against another set. It's not that Noach would be worth less, it's what Rashi says he would be not there. He wouldn't be there because you cannot appear in a set that is measured by a completely different set of definitions. So you don't appear in that set. I finally realized that in terms of our own experiences, that is true, which is amazing, amazing. In other words, it is possible for you to have, let us say, one area of your life in which in that area, maybe it has to do with your job, your associates, or whatever. But there's one area, working area in your life, let's say, in which you have very many, or a few very profound relationships. So this is the person that I trust more than anybody else, the person I can do anything with, and it's unbelievable. He is absolutely the greatest. And this is the only person I would want to work with. Sadiq, Tommy, Teresa, everything. There's another area in your life, which, let's say, you're deeply in love with someone. It's not that type of working relationship. It's this amazing love relationship in which everything that you think this other person thinks. There's like a complete union of thoughts and of feelings. Now, in that space, you'd say, so, like, who did you love in your life? You wouldn't even think of the other person. Despite the fact that 90% of your time and your work and your creativity and your, oh, let's go out for a drink and everything that you do is like completely involved with this other person. But so you'd say, well, yeah, but what does that have to do with this? I mean, this is something totally different. Oh, what do you mean totally different? I mean, how does it stack up one against the other? It looks like
This is really where you are.
Huh?
You're really
It's the space. The question is,
That's
what
what
space
you're
are we
talking
talking about?
That's
So
where
HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, this is my lover. I don't understand. This is Avram Avi. You're asking me, and how would Noah stack up? What do you mean, how would Noah stack up? He's not here at all. It's not part of this, and we would know exactly what he meant. That's all the Rashi is saying. It's something very, very down to earth. That doesn't come into a description of Avram Avi. Fine, okay, that itself means that the end of the parsha provides the insight into what was meant b'chlal of the Lech Lecha, right? So that Lech Lecha really only takes place in a serious way at the end of the parsha, where it becomes the Lech Lecha. Now, all of these questions add up.
Why is it not in the right order?
Sorry?
Why is it written?
Exactly, yeah, that's what we're asking. So all of these questions, but it's not just it's not a question. It's madness. The whole thing is mad. It's like we're telling somebody to do something that he already did. Right? And the strange story of how he gets the kahuna. Because the kahuna appears here because all of a sudden Malki Tzedek, who Hashem, he gets confused. Now he got confused to put Avram first, Baruch Avram Le'elayon, Baruch Le'elayon. Well, I understand, how can it go and forget who goes first, the human being? It's ridiculous. It's truly mad. What does this mean? And he was the one who gave him Maaser Mikol. I mean, so at that moment he gets a telephone call from the Lord and says, Mark, Tzedek, you just lost it. Better give somebody else your Maaser. Of course, it also appears that Avram gives him the Maaser from everything they had here because he was still the Kohen. Right? But in terms of the future, the real Maaser is going to be going to Avram Avinu from everywhere. Because the room is here. So, in any event, taking all of these many, many issues together, the Parsha is telling us the most astonishing thing. The Parsha is telling us, just as Malki Tzedek was smart enough to understand, because remember, Malki Tzedek was the acceptance, Malki Tzedek had shame, as the Navi defines it. That's what we read in the Haftarah. Malki Tzedek defines the attitude of the previous Asara Deres to the post-Torah period, right? To the Alpine Torah period, coming to Avram Avinu. If there's anyone that has to recognize the achievement of Avram, it has to be Malki Tzedek, because he is the one that is now coming. That's why the Navi describes this as being a fraught with terror meeting. As Rashi says, they both were terrified of each other. Like, what in the world is Malki Tzedek going to make of me? Says Avram, a self-made man coming, like, with all kinds of new ideas, and which of course is this issue of the Talmud Chacham. What you going to make of me? And if, as the Navi says, Vayechazak ishat chavero yomar chazak, Adarabba, Malki Tzedek came to me mechazik yitei Avram. What would Malki Tzedek have said to be mechazik yitei Avram? Avram, you made it. How did you make it? With us, God was always first. With you, it's Yitalech Lefanai. You went first. Baruch Avram le'Elohim. Baruch Elohim. So he is saying the very words that represent the final understanding of all of those doros of the Yitalech Lefanai Ve'yetamim, the Lo Haya Nachshav L'Klum, which is why he loses the Kahuna, because he's all Nachshav L'Klum. But he recognized that, giving it over to Amram. Right? It's unbelievable. It's amazing. But what is indicated here? It didn't happen yet. The Yitalech Lefanai occurs later in the parsha. So this too is out of order, in the same way that the Lech Lecha has to express the Yitalech Lefanai that occurs later. So one thing that is undeniable here is that the nature of the Nisayon, which the Rambam defines, clearly is beginning only over here. We cannot accept the Shittas of the Rishonim and the Shittas of the Midrash that learned that the Nisyon, the Eser Nisyonos included the story of the Kivshan Ha'esh. No. All Eser Nisyonos have to be in the Chumash. Anything that's a Medrash is not considered to be one of the Nisyonos, because that's something that you do yourself. You made up your mind that this is the way that you want to grow, fine. So now you can come to Rabbi Yossi, the way Chanya ben Trajan did, and say, so you think it was worth anything? I don't know. Well, Maaseh Baliyatcha. So this is finally a Maaseh Baliyatcha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Lech Lecha. That's a Maaseh, that's Baliyatcha. So now I'll tell you how I prefer the Maaseh. That was Baliyatcha. I'm thinking maybe you should break. I think it's too much for you. You're too jet lagged. You're too exhausted. I think you should go to sleep. Yeah, okay, that's something else. It's another problem. I'm not talking about that problem. So forget about it. We'll do it later. Don't just listen and enjoy now. Forget it. Don't have the computer. That's all you have to say. Now you can be happy, relaxed. Worth much more to me than even you're writing it. Much more. Here's the incredible message. It's so mind-boggling. It's almost incomprehensible. The halicha of an individual and the nisyonos of an individual, the amazing quest of an individual, which is Lech Lecha, Tovatcha, Hanaatcha, which we took to mean, in the deepest sense, that the Lech Lecha ultimately means not only the Tovatcha v'Hanaatcha, but go to discover yourself. Lech Lecha, La'atzmecha. And it's quoted the Enya song, Pilgrim, the road that leads to you. So you could either go to the road of everything that you always knew, or you can go to the road that leads to you. Beautiful words, exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. You want to stay here? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, unbelievable Rabbeinu Bachya, which is his whole psicha to the parsha. You want to stay here? You can continue to grow, and you can grow infinitely. But guess what? You'll never grow beyond the space that you're in. You can't. And this the Rambam defines la'aloch derech briyaseh shel adam. It is your evolutionary reality. Your brain cannot function outside of the space in which it's in. Therefore, either you escape from here, kan iyata zochel abanim, there's no shame that's going to ever be gadol. There's no shame. Why? Because it's stoppered. It's stoppered within a space that is not big enough for you. And the amazing words of the Rabbeinu Bachya is that the definition of choice is your space. You can only choose up to the limits of your space, which means you cannot be free because you will not have choice. So if you put yourself into a society and into a space in which this is the maximum that they conceive of, there's no possible, but I'm growing every day. Yeah, you're growing round and round in the same circle. You're always growing. Of course you're growing. People grow all the time. I learn more Gemaras. I learned to be misgabra more midas. I have a bigger Chiddush in Rashi. Yes, but that's not what growth is. Growth is to escape all of the space so that you enter into completely new darga that previously was unimaginable. Not that is further and further polishing of what you already know. That's the difference between what people would say to a person who's looking for entering into a career of physics in 1899. Don't go into physics, my son. Why? Because there's nothing new that will ever be discovered. I mean, there won't be any. Of course, there'll be physics for thousands of years, but all you'll be doing is putting in extra zeros to the right of the decimal place. You want to dedicate your life to putting extra zeros to the right of the decimal place. These are printed, published considerations that were said before the discovery of relativity, before the discovery of radiation, before the discovery of quantum mechanics, to say the least, before anybody in other words, 99.9% of physics was not just not known, was unimaginable. That's exactly, completely and totally unimaginable. What do you mean that's ridiculous. What do you mean things shrink as they go faster? Come on, you're gonna be crazy. You don't even know what shrinking means. You don't know what faster means. You don't know anything. There's nothing more to be discovered. Right? So life becomes a vast Truman Show. If your space is defined by the Truman Show, there's nothing left to be discovered. That's really true. Not for people who don't watch movies. If you want to live in a space, if you want to live in a space where there's no movies, so then you have to accept the limitations. Right? So the only Eitzah, as Truman knows, is the Eitzah that's given in this parsha, which is Vayotzeo Torah Chutza. I will lift you out of your space. You can get a better look at the universe that you're in, which of course has been the entire process of learning about growth of the entire species. The more you get off planet, as Avram Avinu did, the more you begin to understand what the universe is made up of and your place in it. So even Avram Avinu had, that's because also he had to be taken off planet. He doesn't know how to get off planet. There's nothing else to do. You've got to look back at the solar system from somewhere else. Have any idea what you won't even begin to imagine what it is to be human until you can do that, which accounts for so much of the development of humanity. Therefore, says Rabbeinu Bachya, you want freedom? There is no freedom. You want growth? There is no growth. That's all fine. That turns out to be almost a minimal point in this parsha, because the main point of this parsha is that the quest for that level of growth, to things which you think are unimaginable, because indeed they are unimaginable. So, what are you looking for? I'm telling you that I'm going to show you a place that you cannot imagine. I'm going to show you a mountain which you're going to see that anybody who cannot imagine that mountain now becomes in your eyes the equivalent of an animal. Chamor can't see, you can't see, fine, you're all the same. But you didn't see until right now. Yeah, but now I understand that. I wasn't human until I could learn to see. But why did you come here all the time if you only discovered what you're seeing now? Har Hashem Yera'eh, which becomes the mitzvah of Aliyah Regel, Yera'eh. I mean, it's all a play on everything that's going to come, all of the korbanos. The Sodar korbanos, as Rabbeinu Bachya points out, that's Hanegba, is a remiss Kabbalistically to the Sodar korbanos. So I understand, so why were you going there? Because every human being is on the quest for what he already knows. That's the amazing thing. We will never search for something that we don't already know? Why would we? So in the same way that Chazal tell us that every fetus is exposed to a vision of Gan Eden, and then forgets it at the instant of birth, then why did he have to see it? Because he had to know it in order to search for it. Which is the reason that every child, anywhere on earth, his first sense of why he's in the universe is for perfection. Cannot put up with what he sees as imperfection until his life is destroyed and he gets to believe that everything was meant to be garbage. So that means that in the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a world that is created with Bereshis, Yishvil Yisrael Shenik Bereshis, but who is Yisrael? Oh, you'll see. Do you know? No. Really? Well, the same way that Avram knows, I know. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself says, Be'achad shvatecha, b'makom asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha bo. Who's the Achad shvatecha? We'll see. But don't you know? Didn't you create the world? Wasn't Binyamin always Yedid Hashem? What do you mean Amakom Asher Yivchar? Didn't you take Avram Avinu to Har Moriah? Yeah. But that was before we knew what Har Moriah. Then why did you go there? Why did Avram go there? So even HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Rishis is a quest for what he already knows, obviously. I am waiting for this. Why are you waiting for this? Because that's the whole point. Everything is urging itself towards this. The universe is driven to this. The ultimate sense of the love and power and interaction of the universe is built into the nature of reality. When Avram Avinu discovers HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he's 40 years old, he doesn't discover, he recognizes, says the Rambam. Hikir Avram. What do you mean Hikir? Because I've been looking for you my whole life. That's what Hikir means. Oh my God, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. So why didn't you find me before if you already knew what you're looking for? Because there is a level of clarity of what must emerge, and I know that this must be there, but I must find it. So when Avraham Avinu hears from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am going to show you a land that you cannot imagine. He says, oh my God, this is what I must have been looking for my whole life. So now I'm going to go and find it. I'm going to go there and maybe this time I will find it. And this is exactly what happens. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. So maybe he'll be Mashiach. Oh, damn, he screws up also. This is what Yaakov Avinu says about Shimshon and so on and so forth, right? Because we all know what has to be. We all know what has to be in our own life. And more than that, the very question that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks Adam Rishon in Gan Eden, so where are you? I don't know. And then when you come back, what's the response? Was there a problem? I didn't know there was a problem. I mean, obviously, this is what I always was waiting for, where I always was. I thought I started off here. There was a little bad dream you had in the middle, in which you didn't know. And I asked you, and you said, I don't know. Okay, so this is everybody's bad dream. So you start off knowing, and you're permeated by that knowing. And your quest is not lech lecha, but it's just to yourself in the sense of a pilgrim. It's much more than that. It's lech lecha to the self that you were looking for from the beginning. That's the point. Not you'll discover yourself. That isn't the point. You need to recognize yourself. This is you I waited for. But that's the essence of tshuva. That's the meaning of the sof galuta. That's the meaning of the hay that the world was created with, that means it's a world of tshuva. But that hey is Behi Baram, which is Ba'avraham. But Avraham only becomes Avraham here because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to give you a hey. But that hey is tshuva. Why is that hey tshuva? Because that's the meaning of tshuva. Going back to what I always knew, except I couldn't discover it. So I've spent the past thousands of years trying to get to what I always knew I had to be. So this becomes the Rambam's definition of tshuva and Hilchos Tshuva itself. This is what I always knew I was meant to be. This is what my life was for. That's the whole point. As soon as the process is over, of course this is what I must be. So Mamela, the backwards presentation is itself the most astonishing affirmation that that's the reality. Because what happens over here is that in the same way that the Salech Lefanai at the end is the thing that provides for the Lech Lecha at the beginning, it's not because, no, it's not because of it's because that was what was there the whole time. And therefore you're saying, he's 75, and this is how you begin? Lech Lecha, after he's been there? Yes, exactly, because all of that was what Lech Lecha consisted of. This is what I was doing all along. I just didn't know. Every time I went there, it was a response to Lech Lecha. But I couldn't get there until I heard Lech Lecha. So of course the Lech Lecha comes first. Once the Lech Lecha is there, it's the reality. Everything else is I'm just coming back to what I couldn't remember it was really all about. So in the same sense that as a fetus I know Gan Eden, as an essential, a priori, me. What is that a priori me? It's the very nature of the sense of my own being. Eloha, which is the only thing that allows Avram Avinu to be Avram Avinu in order to be able to be Makir Esbara. So then that means to whatever extent he is capable of sharing that Behi Baram that was always there in the beginning, which was Be Avraham, that's what enables him to be Avram. But that's what enabled the world to be Behi Baram in the first place. And the nail of the backwards presentation is the forwards presentation. That's the whole point. Of course I say Lech Lecha, only because you've already been there. Isn't that what I tell you at the end? Yitalech lefanai. So you had to go first. That's what I said. Oh, I didn't know that. Of course you didn't know that, but you did know that. Why else did you go there, silly? Oh, that's true. Yes, I knew that. And the truth is that everything that a person ultimately discovers about themselves, if you put them up against the wall, you mean you didn't know? No, of course I knew. So what took you so long to get here, you jerk? I don't know, it just takes a long time to figure out what you know. And this is true, it is true in the simplest level. It's true even in the whole process of creativity, which of course relates to Bris Milah. Somebody makes a discovery, an immense discovery, a discovery that enters into a completely new space. How did he get there? He got there because he knew where he was going in the first place. He didn't randomly find the one out of the 10 trillion possible approaches that could have taken him up a dead end. He went there in the same way that a good chess player plays a chess game. Why did you make that move? You're not smart enough to calculate 10,000 moves ahead. But you knew where you were going. That's the point. You must know where you are going. You knew where the solution to this mathematical issue was. How did you know? How does an idiot savant know? Really, how does an idiot savant able to sit back and tell you every prime number that he figures out? Because he doesn't figure it out. You know, the famous twins, right? You know, the famous twins, the idiot savant twins. Famous, incredible mice. It's one of the most amazing clinical stories. There were these twins, both of them were completely off their rockers. They couldn't communicate, they couldn't say anything to anybody, they could only talk to each other. And the only thing that they would say to each other were numbers. I would say a number, and the other twin would sit and would look like up there, and all of a sudden he burst out laughing at this number. They couldn't figure out what that until finally somebody worked out that every number was a prime number. And that's what they were doing. They were communicating only about prime numbers. And the joy of seeing that there's you can't figure out that it's a prime number. It would take a computer 20 years or something. They saw prime numbers. I mean, you're talking about prime numbers, not of 1 digit or 2 digits or 3 digits. Talking about prime numbers. It would take people 40 years to actually multiply out to figure out that they really are prime numbers. How do you do that? It's crazy. And all such types of things. It's absolutely crazy. Now have somebody sit down because of a brain injury who never knew how to play piano, and now he sits down at the piano and makes up music and plays as if he's played his whole life. And why? Because he got a bullet through the brain. These things happen all the time. I mean, it's like it's madness. So obviously there's a level of idea that comes from a direct perception of something. I have to make that question, what is you? So the that we have, just of an idea of pilgrim, that's what, the road that leads to you, this is infinitely more than that. It's not the road that what was discovered by Abraham. It's the road that he was searching for, in which he could finally recognize what he always knew was there. Oh, that it's real, because I recognize the person that you fall in love with. I always knew that you were there somewhere. Thank God I finally found you, but I know that it's you. And it's exactly the same thing here. This is Avraham Avi. Amazing stuff. So the entire parsha is mamish built around this. If that's the case, then what it means is that the deeper understanding of Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, which everybody thinks, so Avraham made this terrible mistake. I should say everybody. Sarah made this terrible mistake how she's treating Hagar. Avram made this terrible mistake of leaving Eretz Yisrael. Avram made this ridiculous mistake of exposing his wife to Paro. And Paro calls him to task. How could you do such a thing? What's the matter with you? I mean, all of this, as we've explained in the past, all of this is part of his Amalek Lefanai. The Maisa Avos Lebanim, Siman Lebanim, is exposed in this parsha as the search for yourself. That's the point. You go down to Mitzrayim because HaKadosh Baruch Hu never told Abraham you're going to be going down to Mitzrayim, your children. All this is Be'eretz Lebanim, in exactly the same way that he says, Ba'aretz Asher Areh, in exactly the same way as he tells him, Alachad Arim Asher Amar. Do I know that it's Mitzrayim? Of course I know that it's Mitzrayim. Am I an idiot? Do I not understand the simple history? Any idiot understands. Who is in charge right now of Canaan? Who is the leading civilization? Who controls, whose currency is all over Eretz Canaan? Obviously, if it's going to be any land, it's going to be the center of civilization. Of course it's going to be Mitzrayim. And what is the relationship between Eretz Asher Eka and the land of Mitzrayim? Gosh, I know. Of course I know. It's what the Gemara says. These two societies, Canaan and Mitzrayim, are the most sexually corrupt societies ever to have lived. And the moment that Klal Yisrael will go down to Mitzrayim is the moment of its greatest corruption. And the moment of the capturing of Eretz Yisrael will be the moment of its greater. So it's all about sex. So then, of course, I have to go down to Mitzrayim. I have to prepare the Rechush Gadol, and now, of course, I begin to understand. What does Rashi really mean? Rashi really means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Avram Avinu and says, You have a vision, and I know what your vision is. Your vision is the remaking of this world. That's your vision. And you believe that the remaking of this world is achieved the way that everything is achieved in this world, by evolution. And you're going to be the next step. What is your next step going to consist of? You're the one that is going to achieve the monopoly on resources so that you can define where the future is. You are the one who's going to be the alpha male because you're going to be the most powerful, you're going to be the richest, and because of that, you're going to have the most children. And you're going to spread your genes, and your children will take over the world. And that is your vision of the future. And I'm telling you, leave. And you say, leave? You mean to be a loser? You mean not to have children? You mean not to be rich? You mean not to be famous? And how will I ever be able to achieve those things that I need to achieve? Ah, that's the whole point, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're right. Haderech mima'etet, exactly the three things that evolution requires. Competition for resources, competition for fame, which is ultimately competition for genes. You're 100% right. But you know what? Evolution is not going to work the way it used to work. And you know where this is going to end? You're going to remake your genitals. But they work very well in an evolutionary sense. As we've already seen, if there was any usefulness to snipping off pieces of my genitals, you don't think that evolution would have discovered it? And that's exactly, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the whole point. We are now in this together. From this point on, it's no longer a question of random gathering of resources. You know what? It's the right gathering of resources. This guy offers you multi-trillion dollars, throw it back in his face, idiot. He's going to say, I don't care, throw it back in his face. Well, can I just take it? No, it's filthy, dirty money. Why would you want to have anything? How can you build a world out of those kind of resources? Stoman Amora, throw it back on him. And that becomes the shruch and the chud, the shruch now and the chud, that becomes the poraduma, the tikkun of the now, which becomes the story of Rus and Boaz and Yubim and Chalitza and all of the things that have to evolve into David HaMelech here, because you've learned what is worth surviving and what is not worth. So getting rid of the wrong rechush is just as important as getting the right rechush. That's never true on an evolutionary basis. Take whatever you can. Have all the children. No, not anymore, Abraham. No. You don't want to take everything that walks down the street and looks pretty. Why would you want to do that? That's for animals. That was evolution until today. Now, you're going to take a path, which is mima'etet, all the thing that any stupid animal would know. I don't want to do that. How am I ever going to be me big geek lion if I'm not going to be able to be in my own territory? I'm going to give you the territory. The territory? Yeah, but you're going to grow into that territory as a dream. It may take you thousands of years. The territory will be the end of the process, not the beginning of the process. It's the opposite of evolution. It's an evolution that is defined by where it's going, as opposed to where it's going being an accident of what happened along the way. So El Haaretz Asher Ar'eka is going to be an Emo, Chashecha, Gedola, Nofela, and every time you're going to think, but just as I thought I got this country, I got thrown out of it. Well, I wonder why. So it's an amazing description of an entirely new vision of history, new vision of development, which is empowered by everything that nature is not, unless you look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratius. Ratius means that I know where it's going, which means that the universe is embedded with a mission, which its space inevitably forces it into a mission. Where's the mission? Does it know anything? It knows nothing. But did you notice that it is embedded with the most insane power of growing into complexity? Where do you think that comes from? Why is it that that's the nature of the existence of every particle and every force? That's all a story of insane interrelationships leading to greater and greater information and complexity. Don't you understand that that's an expression of what it is? In the same way that you're an expression of what you are. So you come to understand, this is what I am. I just don't recognize it yet, but I know it deep down, right? So, okay, so then I go and become that. That's right. Well, the world is going to become that. So couldn't it just become it on its own? No, of course not. Because part of what it is Bihibaram. And therefore, the only way it can know itself is when you discover yourself. And then you will have the territory that all the other animals need by pissing around every tree that they go around. They need that in order to be able to be themselves. You get that by being yourself. What is it? Completely new vision of reality. Unbelievable. So that becomes Yitalech L'Fanai. You need to have that vision. You need to go first. How can you possibly go ahead of God? Because you already know. Because you share the Bihibaram. You knew up front that you were Avraham. So you must have known about Avraham. But my name was Avram. Yeah, but not really. Your name was Avraham. You just didn't know it yet. So of course, you thought you started off with Avraham. I promised you, you keep walking in front of me, and you will see that Haninu Goyim Amo. That's what you're going to see at the end of this story. That every piece of the universe is going to say, oh my, they must have known all along, as Rashi says in the end of the Torah. They must have known all along. And we say, did we? We didn't know we knew all along. But at the end, when you ask, you really didn't? I guess I did. How else did we make it out? Like, why would we have gone through this if we didn't know all along? So you did know all along. Yeah, I guess, but I just found that out. That's okay. And it's an absolutely astounding story brought out at the very beginning of the Chumash of what the nature of the quest is. So the very thing that is most striking, that makes no sense in the story, from a literary point of view, it's a crazy story, as the Rishonim point out. Who? Who is Avram? Avram, I just mentioned him. He was like one of the kids that was born to Terah. But what did he do? I mean, why did God talk to him? I mean, give me a little background. I mean, what do you mean by Yom Rishon Avram? In the middle of nowhere? How could that be? Who is he? The point is, who is he? We're on a quest to find out. So even the structure of the parsha is ridiculous to make the reader think, who is this? It's like writing a novel without telling you anything about the person. And now you know that in the course of the novel, that's going to explain to you who this person was at the beginning and why all of this was happening. Because that's the way he has to discover himself. So you, the reader, have to discover him the way he discovers himself. Which is why, ultimately, the Midrashim that are chelik on the Rambam are really based on this. Of course it's true that if a guy decides that he wants to jump into a Kivshanei, he might just be a regular kamikaze pilot or a nut. So how can we count that as one of the Eser Nisyonos? Because at the end, it turns out that he really knew what he was doing. In which case, in the same way that Lech Lecha is empowered by Yisalech, the Anoch Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeiticha Miur Kastim. Ur Kastim turns out to have been powered by exactly the same of the Lech Lecha that comes at the end. So that would explain how the Midrashim are chelik on the Rambam, how the other Rishonim are chelik on the Rambam. It just takes the same story, it just expands it further. It's unbelievable. It's mamish unbelievable. So now, most amazingly, the same thing is true about the Nesina of Eretz Yisrael. That's what's so unbelievable. We asked. This is a weird story. The Torah begins with Koach Ma'asa V'Gidli Amo, which is actually the Bereshis. And then it turns out that Bereshis is Bishvil Yisrael Shenit Bereshis. And that is going to be the Swiss Eretz Yisrael, which we have to be able to say to the UN. Kadosh Baruch Hu created a world, he gave it to us because of Rambam. It says because of what we are. How did they have any tainas? Since it says over here, Va'aknani az ba'aretz. The moment that Avram Avinu comes to Shem, Adel on Moreh, Va'aknani az ba'aretz. Who cares about Knani az ba'aretz? Because we need to know that the Canaanim were in the middle of the kivush of Eretz Yisrael from Shem. I don't know, why do I need to know that? And if it's true, then why aren't we allowed to just take it back? And why do we need to have Kol Ma'aseh V'Gid L'Ama? In the very next section, Vayiriv Ben Ro'eh Lot L'Ro'eh Avram. Why? Because HaKnaani as Yoshev Ba'aretz. Oh, so in other words, between the time of the beginning of the parasha and the story of coming back, they were, at the beginning, we hear about them in the process of going ahead and conquering. In the second section, we find that they are then Yoshev Ba'aretz, right? Problem is that we just explained that this is all out of order. If Avram was 75 years old when he arrived in Eretz Yisrael as a result of Lech Lecha, why does it say HaKnani Az Ba'aretz Ben Kovesh if they were already Yoshev Ba'aretz 3 years before, or 2 years before, which was the later story of going to the Mitzrayim. So, I mean, it's not so partial to that. It's the simple level that all of this happened as a response of Lech Lecha. You go from Lech Lecha, you go from the yeshiva, from the beginning of a kivush to an actual yeshiva. And that is the whole reason why there's a machlokas between Ro'eh and Avram. So Ro'eh Lot say, well, exactly what I just said. We have a right to take this. It's really ours. And they stole it. And Avram says, no, but right now they have a split of yeshiva bars. So, but that doesn't explain how, why, right? So, there's an amazing thing that the Navi Yirmiyahu says. That he says, Eretz Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us Nachalas Tzvi Tzivot Goyim. Nachalas Tzvi Tzivot Goyim. Sorry, I forgot. So the Ramban explains that HaKnani as Yoshev Ba'aretz means that actually different nations would move into different areas at different times. It happened to be that the Knani was Yoshev Ba'aretz. They were nomads. So for a while they would stay in this place and somebody else would come in this place. We're saying at that time they happened to be there. There's a completely different meaning than the Knani were conquering the Aretz. Right? But the amazing thing is that, as Yirmiyahu says, the Nachal of Eretz Yisrael is called Nachalas Tzvi. It's called Nachalas Tzvi. Tzvi is desirable. So there's something desirable about it. But it's not that you desire it. It's Tzivot Goyim. All the Goyim desire it. And that's why when we find in Devarim, we start discussing the Hermon, the Torah gives us all kinds of different names, Well, this country calls it Sneer. They go, so the Gemara says, you know what this teaches us? And the Rishonim uses to answer the obvious question of how in a tiny piece of territory were there 31 different kings? It's nonsensical. There are 31 different kings. 31 malachim when the entire Mitzrayim and half the rest of the earth is controlled by one person. How there are 31 kings? So Ramban says, yes, because the point over here is, that Ramban says that in a different context. I'm going to show you. The Gemara in Chumah says. So the idea of the Tzidonim, call it Sneer, and Ashkenaz, snow, snay, so that's Sneer, Ashkenaz, like we're talking about German now. What in the world is going on? Yes, says the Gemara. Because every single country on earth wanted so much the covet of having Shaykhs to Eretz Yisrael even to just a mountain in Eretz Yisrael. Forget about it. A Mokum, just press cancel. A Mokum Choshev in Eretz Yisrael. That they all built cities and named them Al Shem the mountain in Eretz Yisrael. That they should have the covet of having a representation in Eretz Yisrael that represents their presence in Eretz Yisrael. So now what that means is that the Yatsev Gvulot Amim, who is it? L'mispar b'nei Yisrael. Yatsev Gvulot Amim. What is the meaning of the Yatsev? As Yosef HaTzadik says, Kama alumati v'gam nitzava. What's the relationship between the Kama and the Nitzava? So the Nitzava means when something is finally settled in its place, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Go'er and the Tov Vavo and things settle, right? So the Nitzava is only Yatsev Gvulot Amim L'mispar b'nei Yisrael. That means that what we consider to be chalakim that are given to the nations, it's not given to the nations. It's all still part of the Olam HaTohu until the Mispar b'nei Yisrael is settled. To the extent that Yisrael is zochet to its vision of itself, to that extent, the Amim become centered in their own territories. This is how Barbanel points out, that the relationship of other countries is in terms of how close they are to the development of Bnei Yisrael. So the more civilized they are, and the point of that's why a Western civilization, which they consider a Judeo-Christian civilization, so the argument we're miscarriages. For miscarriages, yourself into greater and greater territories, until we have the Yisrael Mummer in terms of Esav to be Zochet, exactly the same territory in a sense, right? Same word, Tala Shamayim. This is Italy. You take a look at the structure of Italy, the topography of Italy, the Galil of Italy, the light of Italy. It's just an amazing thing how much it's connected, the Galil of Eretz Yisrael. It's mamish strength.
It's 22 hours.
Ooh, what? Yikes. I'm talking too long. I was going to talk just a little. Right? So that means that in the same way that there's a growth towards yourself, there's a growth towards yourself. When Avram Avinu came to understand that it's not a coincidence that I'm going to be torn between Mitzrayim and Canaan, his immediate conclusion was, I not only need to take care of Rechush Gadol, and I not only need to take care of Ayisham, the Goy Gadol, and you will be a Goy Gadol. Let's have a Goy Gadol. That Goy Gadol turns out to be through Mitzrayim and through Eretz Goshen, all of which Avram Avinu sets up. But there's another very important thing. Paro has to recognize his own moral depravity. Now watch this. Here comes Paro, and he's going to start giving me mussar. How could you do such a thing? You know, around here, we're moral people. We don't leave our wives to be taken by others. I'm outraged, are you? That's nice. So then finally, when Avimelech says, but I know that can't be true, so tell me. There's a beautiful difference, because to Paro, he doesn't respond, right? And yet Paro is totally committed to Avram, despite the fact that he's yelling and shouting. He appoints guards, he's malavim, vayetzaveim, right? And he says, Avram, I gotta admit it, this place is a rape center. You can't stay here. Nobody's ever seen a beautiful woman before. You've got to get out of this country. I'll give you soldiers, we'll give you guards, we'll get you. Oh, you say you have a moral problem in the country? Yeah, but let's not talk about it. Could we just get out of here, please? Right? Avimelech, on the other hand, has a more civilized depravity problem. So when he yells at Avram, how could you? I'm outraged. Pasuk repeat. This is after he's shouting at him. Vayomer lo. So now Avimelech says, what do you mean Vayomer lo? You've just been talking to him. Vayomer lo. No. He says, you don't understand. I'm not shouting. I need to understand this. This wasn't rhetorical. Ma ra'ita ki asita hadavar hazeh. Explain it to me. Oh, you really want to know? Yes. Well, if you really want to know, when you come into a country and somebody asks you, hey, who's the broad? That isn't the country you want to live in. Now you know. So Abimelech says, I want to bris with this guy. And because of that, it's amazing how this Mamshina gave his Manazem. So in the selections, right? What is everybody talking about? The great morality, the sexual depravity of Donald Trump, right? It's all they have to talk about. Oh, look how he talks about women. Oh, look how he gropes at women. You know, so the guy used to be the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, was like talking to this woman, and it's Israel. And she was like, carrying on about how can anybody vote for such a person? And he says, you have nothing on your brain but sex. There's not a single issue that you think about. I think you're just fascinated by sex. He says, no, on TV. And so finally somebody says, kind of mishigas, you phony. Such a phony. You know some man that doesn't talk like that. What kind of nonsense is this? All of a sudden, you're the big Kaddish for Torah. So the state prosecutor in New York who put all of these abusers into prison, they threw him into prison. He was worse than all of them put together. I mean, it's like hundreds of mice like this. So you're the guys that are going to be giving, right? So for any region to say, Paro understood, and Avimelech understood that. Avram made like a little mistake. Maybe it's okay, but it's like unbelievable. It just happens to be that it was Ma'aseh Avos Simul Banim, and this became the Revush Gadol, and this became the Yaskala Goy Gadol. But he did the wrong thing. What in the world is going on over here? Everything that he did was Yisalech Lefanai. I haven't even told you yet, Kiger Yazaracha. Oh, but I know. I will take care of it. That's the Yisalech Lefanai. So, Mamela, it turns out that even in terms of the growth to the land, Avram Avinu knew that this is the land that he has to be in. How? Because the vision of Rashis that Avram has is shared by Eretz Yisrael, which is also Rashis. It's the Mogam around which the earth was finished. So when everybody comes here and recognizes things just look different here, I have a different mindset here, what does that come from? Because they have Ruach HaKodesh? No. It becomes from the fact that people are searching for themselves in the same way that the universe searches for itself. I know that I have a friend. I know that I have a place. I'm Makir. Like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Makir as Bayrei. So Mamela, the Yatzei Gulot Amin, has to be only in terms of, so what is the difference then between Yisrael and these other Umayas, that they should be the one that get Nachalas Tzvi? And this is why the Gemara says, that Eretz Yisrael should be Motzi Perot. It's only going to be Motzi Perot when it's ready to respond to a lover. Like any, and that's exactly the nafkamina here. It's amazing. The nafkamina between the Yisalech Lefanai V'Yetami and the person who simply allows the continued development of an evolutionary process in which he is driven by physical needs, is exactly this nakuda. It's the nakuda of whether there is love or whether there is need and desire. Someone who does not know love is basically a sexual maniac, because everything that he does is physically driven. The moment that he discovers love, he can no longer engage in mechanical sex. It's a disgusting thing. Why? Because there's something that's a different space in which this is completely experienced as if it's something supernatural, as if it's nifla. which is literally the words niflata, avat. Niflata means it's inconceivable. How would I waste such a thing on disgusting animal actions and lose everything that I care about? So of course, it's the same thing with masturbation. So little kids will masturbate. What does it mean to them? Nothing. It's a physical pleasure. They're no different than any other physical pleasure. Once a person discovers the hashivas of a relationship and love and a connection, it's not inconceivable. So it's literally inconceivable. What crazy. All of this is part of the most wonderful part of my life. The most insane thing in my life. It's exactly the same thing happens in terms of the Aretz. I'm not going to produce Paris as Eretz Yisrael for animals. So once Eretz Yisrael starts to produce, it's an act of love. And it's only going to produce for those who love her. So Mamela, once Yisrael is on a madrega to be able to, which has just happened. Once Yisrael is on a madrega, that Eretz Yisrael starts to develop in ways that are just, your mouth hangs open. How did this happen? Eretz Hazeh, that was completely destroyed and empty, became Gan Eden. How did that happen? In no time at all. How did that happen? To become the most developed, the most incredibly water-rich, resource-rich. What understand? There was nothing here. This was like the biggest joke, So God found the most horrible place on earth and gave it to the Jews. That's literally what people would joke about. So how did it become the greatest economy? How did it become the most effective medicine? How did it become the greatest discoverers? How did this happen in the space of 50 years? Explain it. How did this happen? How? Because it's response, it's love. So it's obviously time for lovers to come together. That's exactly the point. So and this is right from the pasuk. Okay. So it means the same reaction in which Avram here becomes the Avram Oavi, in which Avram here becomes the individual that is now going to be seen as a completely different level of humanity because he's discovered himself, and that becomes the Lechva that he knew all along to be Mitalech Lefanai. What remains is the question, the strange end of the parsha. So in the end of the parsha, Avram Avinu, after hearing about the nature of love, because Baruch has to give him Muslim, as the Medrash says, Avram, you don't know the difference between a concubine and this woman that has loved you your whole life and you've invested. I'm telling you that Sarah Ishtecha is going to have you a child. And what? And you're consorting with this piece of garbage? Aren't you embarrassed? And Avram is saying, Lu Yishmael Yichel Lefanecha, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, okay, but I hear you. What do you mean you hear me? You just told me I'm crazy. So why do you hear me? And why would Avram say that? And how did this happen? So the truth is that there were two completely different dargahs. The birth of Ishmael is recorded in terms of the first part of the story. Yomer Lahamalach, Malach Hashem, and so on. You need to go back there. The same kind of Lashonas that are told to Avram Avinu. Charav Yeladet Bain, the Karat Shmo Yisrael. We still don't have the tzivui of Ani El Shaddai Yitalech Lefanai V'Yatamim. Right? It's after Yishmael is born, 13 years later. Yitalech Lefanai V'Yatamim. So what happens to everything in this period between the initial Lech Lecha and the actual discovery of what it means to be Yitalech Lefanai, which now retroactively completely redefines the nature of that halicha? What turns the original Lech Lecha into something that in the course of this parsha has a dark area in the middle, such that that entire story divided into these separate setumes talk about the development from a relationship, a pogum relationship,
What?
pogum, a pegima in the relationship, which grows ultimately into the recognition of the idea, my gosh, we're going to change the name of Sarah, Aitala Goyim, Malchi Ami Mimena Yiyu. And nonetheless, he would say, Lu Yishma Yechiel Lefanecha, and he doesn't ask for it. He says, I wish. So as we explained in the past, the nature of I wish is, of course I recognize that that's over. That period where I was in darkness and looking for myself is over. But the question is, did anything come of it? When I say Lu Yishmo Yechiel Lefanecha, I understand. Right now you're saying Inu Nechshav L'Klum, so to speak, right? But what I wonder is, everything that I lived, and every human being can say this, you come at the end of your life and you think about, but this is what I was meant to be always. It's what I always, if you're successful with life, this is what I always searched for. And if I would ask you, but did you always know? Yes, but did you always know that you knew? No. So when you didn't know that you knew, what were you doing? But that's not true. You were doing unbelievable things in different spaces. Look at what you achieved. Look at, as Rabbi Yochanan says, look at the adventures that the person had to choose. Did you go into Ur Kasdim? Did you jump into the Kibshon Ha'esh? Did it count as an Isaiah? No. So what were you doing? So what was it? Did anything come of it? So Avram Avinu says, what I would like, if only it were possible, is that every step of the process that I invested myself in, that I wanted, if only it could be that something real would come from each aspect of it. If only it were possible that even Yishmael, who was part of the original Lech Lecha before Yita Lech Lecha, but it was my Halitha. If only he too could discover life, and therefore we explain the Aval Sarah Ishtach means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to confirm. We on Aval in the sense of truth. Aval Sarah Ishtach. That's clear? Yes. Okay. Then Lishmo Shmati. We will make something come of even the steps which retroactively turn out, and therefore he's called a wild man. He's a para Adam. He's not an Adam, because that's Adam Atem. That means somebody who's in the Darga of Vitalech Lefanayim. As far as you're concerned, this is literally what we would call a wild boar, something that is uncivilized, a Yoshev Midborians, something that the Gemara says HaKadosh Baruch Hu rejects and is sorry every single day that I created them, right? 4 things HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitcharet every day that he went ahead and created. Where's the Makar? Yeah. So, yeah. So the Lashon of the Gemara in Sukkah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitcharet alem, that she was bar up. And that's Yishmaelim. What do you mean Yishmaelim? But you said so. Yes. I said so, and it was a big mistake, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I never should have listened to it. The Shmaticha. So, what's the pasuk? Tichtiv yishloyu ohalim l'shodadim. Look at this, the complacency of these tents, the barbarian, the spoilers. Uftuchot margizei el. And if they walk around so sure of themselves, people that drive me crazy, they get me so angry. What God himself brought with his own hands, boy, I don't know what I was thinking. Amazing person. Amazing person. But it's not just an amazing person. It's the definition of everything that happens. The fact that we call them shodadim, what does that mean? Because they happen to hold up caravans. And the para Adam, no, it's an amazing thing. In the same way that the beginning of the parsha defines the limitations of Bechira, kan I ata zoche, right? The original Halich, which is, okay, so that's the way out, right? No, wrong. Halicha is not the way out. Halicha lefanai is the way out. And it isn't even enough to be halicha lefanai. Hitalchut lefanai is the way out. Now you need to understand all of that separately, my dear Avram, because if you simply walk away, you will end up with a terrible problem. The terrible problem is you carry around known limitations of your space. It's all very nice to say, but I've escaped this ridiculous society. Yes, but you haven't escaped yourself. How does one escape themselves? Oh, I get it. Hitalchut, which is reflexive. So to be holech means simply to be holech from. To be mitalech means there's a constant growth in me. That's the answer. No, Avram. That was Noah's answer. That's not a good enough answer. No. But why? It's not a good enough answer because inevitably, even a hitalchut, which is not lefanai, will be limited by what it is that you already know. Your space of hitalchut will allow you to go round and round in circles in which you're growing all the time with your halicha. It's halicha within that space. There's only one way that you can get out of it. What is that? Hitalchut lefanai. But how can I do that? You're God. You know everything. You're always there in front of me. No, I'm not. That's the point. Asher bara Elohim la'asod, as the Ramchal points out. This entire bria is yours to do it. So the simplest level. There's two dargas in Brit Milah. The first darga in Brit Milah is the simple Asher bara Elohim la'asod. And that's the way the chinuch is mefarish, the basis of Brit Milah. The chinuch, Sefer Chinuch is mefarish. Asher bara Elohim, I'm about to explain. Bara Elohim la'asod means that it's a terrible mistake to believe that God runs the world. The world was created in order for you to do something. Shebara Elohim la'asod. Now it's your turn. So the end of the 7 days creates the 8th day. The 8th day is yours. Now it's la'asod. That's the simplest meaning of Milah. And therefore, by definition, what you inherited out of those 7 days is not going to be enough. Of course not. You inherited only sufficient to do something with. But now that you're at that point, as I said at the beginning of from, up until now, brachot hayu biyadi, because I was making things happen. Now, the brachot are mesurot liyadcha. Being most of the brachos liyadcha means going all the way back to Ma'aser Bereishis and the original bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives for you. And as the Sefer, the Sefer Yetzirah explains that bracha, the inyan of bracha, is to take the original pool, the breicha, whether it's a gene pool, possibility pools, the potential, the essential vision of what this world is shy of generations. It's yours. And that relates directly to the B'yibara, which, again, the simple level people think means, so up until now, the way Rashi explains it, up until now, I was an animal. Right? So an animal has no control, not over his eyes, not over his ears, and not over his penis. Walks along a beautiful girl, all of a sudden he's walking around with a hard penis. How did that happen? No idea. Why? Because you're an animal. Okay. Avram, this doesn't happen to. Why? Because those 5 Evarim, which animals don't control, you will control. So that's the last soul. But that's the simplest level of Bris Milah. Because all that it means is that now you have a path to choose and going towards it and so on and so forth. But it certainly cannot allow for a lefanai. What shaykh was that lefanai? All it's saying is I'm allowing you You have enough keiches. How do I have enough? Because as a result of being an animal that needed to run away from predators and so on, your brain had to develop the most amazing capacities, which ultimately gives you an ability to understand mathematics, to develop aesthetics. Why did it give me those things? Silly. It didn't give you those things. It gave you what you needed to survive. But out of needing to survive in a real world comes an ability to recognize that that real world exists within a space of the Baram. And because of that, amazingly, by pure coincidence, since you needed to have a brain that was based on an ability to detect where it might be going, you're certainly going to be as good as a bee who is attracted to flowers. As a matter of fact, if you're a total animal, you'll call the flower a honey trap. And you will be forced to do things that you didn't want to do and give away secrets you never wanted to give. The same way a bee is forced to look for honey. But if you use the attraction that you discover to recognize that, but it's not that I'm attracted like that to a flower. I would never take a flower to bed. So then why do you like flowers? They're beautiful. They're beautiful. What does that even mean? Does the bee think the flower is beautiful? No, the bee doesn't know about beautiful. So then, but a bee needs the flower and you don't need the flower. So what does that mean? So there was the ancillary development that allowed you the broader use, the broader free use, because that's what's unique about you. You are able to take things that weren't built for a particular purpose, like a stone, and make them part of a particular purpose, like a slingshot. That's what's special about you. You are able to take mechanisms that were built for transferring pollen for flowers that you didn't even know you were part of a broader system of doing that. You know, it's like this idea. You thought you were looking for food for little bees. You know, but you, human, are able to take that same thing and say, well, what is the meaning of such an attraction? And why is it that in order to attract bees, you have this most exciting development of beautiful genitals all over the world? These incredible colors and smells and so on, and they're all genitals. Isn't that weird? So do you understand that? What do you think of your own genitals? Might they be prettier? Could you aesthetically address that? Yeah, but why? What do you mean? Why would you? Why would you have flowers in your home on your Shabbos table? And that's the point. So now you can be B'chal Shabbos to have prettier genitals. That's like Keli Van Veil. Right? So now you have to have a pretty penis. That's halacha. To be B'chal Shabbos. I was already yotz to be in the first milah. I just have like little pieces of skin that don't look pretty. Doesn't matter. Zekeli Van Veil. You're B'chal Shabbos for Zekeli Van. No, you're B'chal Shabbos for Bris Milah. But this is the way to properly do Bris Milah. It has to be beautiful. Isn't that the point? Therefore, be B'chal Shabbos because you're still being Isaac and Bris Milah. An unbelievable concept. Right? So once that's true, that all of these ancillary things are yours, now we start talking about what it is to be human. But that's not enough because it's still not Sharti Talech Lefanai until you take that one step further and you realize that the space in which these ancillary developments are such that they lead you to discover entirely new spaces, such as beauty, freedom, hakora of existence. To be makir as Avram Avinu, to be makir HaKadosh Baruch Hu as if you always knew him. Once you can do that, it means you're mischaber to the original Behi Baram. It means that we share that dream of riches. That's what it means. So if we share the dream and I need you for that dream, and you know you're the agency, the only agency that can accomplish that dream. Because that dream of Lech Lecha is not directed to you as an individual human being. It's addressed to the universe. Lech Lecha. How is the universe going to be a Lech Lecha if it isn't you? So you're the agent. So of course it has to be Lefanai. What are you thinking? It always had to be Lefanai. I just was waiting and waiting and waiting until we finally got to the stage where that would be possible. But obviously it's Lefanai. So therefore, when you tell me, Lu Yishma Yechel Lefanecha, before we discovered Lefanai, what do you think he's going to be? I'll tell you what he'll be. This is what comes out so astonishingly. Vayishma Hashem et kol anar v'asher hu sham. He will always be exactly where he is. I'll never get anywhere. It will always be v'asher hu sham. That's what you asked for. You want to know what could come of a life that was my life then, before I knew about it. I'll tell you. You'll watch him, and damned if you won't be sorry, because I'll be sorry. Who needs it? Who needs it? I'm sorry I ever listened to you. Because what happens is he'll live off of everybody else. Shodedi, bozes him. But glorious civilization, stolen civilization. Aristotle's thinking, Chinese mathematics, stolen. Show me what he does on his own. Go ahead, show me. I'll tell you what he does. He steals. And then he's so pathetically complacent about it. Yishaloyim. B'tuchot l'mar Gizayah. Ba'asher hu sham. He rewrites history because that's where he's at. There was no temple. But we all know there was a temple. No, of course there was no temple. But what about those archaeological finds? We threw them out. What archaeological finds? And so on and so forth. I mean, that's unbelievable. Ba'asher hu sham. Wherever he is, that's reality. There's no possible way to get out of this reality. And that's the amazing power of Islam, is that nothing should ever develop. It has the final say on everything. At last comes along the real Navi and tells you we've taken everything else into consideration. We've boiled everything down. Nothing can be thought of. There is nothing but Kniyah, human, to Ratzon of the Great One. Is this what you wanted? You were complaining about Mesek Eliezer. You knew enough to say, what a tragedy it would be if the only thing that came of everything that I did is somebody who knew all my Torah and was always saying Kedushin in my Torah, being daylight deeper and deeper into the great wells of the well springs of Torah, he would call it, the well springs of Abraham, from whom I learned everything. You know what a tragedy that would be? This is what's going to inherit me, never to go anywhere, to say the same thing all the time, so that every sefer reads the same as every other sefer, so that every chiddush reads the same as every other chiddush, all variations on the theme, and never to be able to break out of it. Round and round and round and round. So what will happen with such a thing? So Yishmael's bris milah, this is Zohar says, will prevent Klal Yisrael from getting Eretz Yisrael. Why? Until the schus of that milah is over. And when will the schus of that milah be over? The Zohar doesn't say. No, the Zohar doesn't say. The Pasuk says. The schus of that milah will be over when Klal Yisrael discovers what the milah was. It was not a milah of halicha. It was a milah b'talech lefanai. That's the difference. The same difference between Yishmael as a 13-year-old who has sexual morality imposed upon him as an adult, and who must learn Mesiras Nefesh from being able to sit and accept the fact that somebody's going to be mutilating him at the age of 13. This, you think, is comparable to a child born into a completely new level of sexual identity and awareness, which his entire life is dedicated to going beyond evolution, and which is the most natural thing in the world? This is comparable. This Mesiras Nefesh, this bloodletting, this is what it was about, you think. Watch the bloodletting of these people. That's all that they'll do to the world is bloodletting. After all, it's all about jihad. And the amazing thing is, you're right. It is all about jihad. Because it really is about Milchemes Hashem. But the Milchemes Hashem is the development of the world. And the concept of their jihad is the destruction of the world. And the destruction of all development, the destruction of all growth. And all it has to do with is that one question. Was there a Lefanai or not? You tell an Arab Lefanai, Lefanai, which we do only what God tells us exactly. That's what it means. Islam means submission. That's what it's about. Submit, submit. And Avram Avinu in the next parsha, argue, argue, argue. That's what it's all about. Never submit. I don't like the way you're being done, Stamamora. You don't like? No, I don't like. I want to tell you something about Mishpat. Tamil Okay. It's like, and that just because of this difference. What happened during, and we would never have known if Avram, hadn't said, but there should be things that are left from the period of development. It's too early for the ayat to eat it all up. It's never too early in a sense, because it should never have happened. So this becomes a parsha of the completion of the sense of quest, which defines in the end the quest of the universe for itself, which ultimately finds HaKadosh Baruch Hu's quest for Rashis in a world, shouldn't say a world, a single world, but a universe that makes sense in terms of the search for all possible expressions of what that Rashis could be. The Kol Ha'olamos Asher Bara Min Ha'olam Ad Ha'olam, as the Medrash puts it, that is ultimately always going to be. All of you are questing. All of you will find the solutions that you are making. Amazing. Okay, that is our review. Before I finish, I want to make sure that there wasn't anything like seriously important that I totally forgot to mention. Excuse me, just 1 second, everybody. Hold on a minute there. And let's see. Right. Just astonishing. Gosh. Same date. She's not Shabbos. Yeah, no, I think I got it. I think I got it all. You think of anything else that was left out from the show on Shabbos? I think that's good. Gentlemen, ladies, light it up.
It's interesting that it's also, did Rabbi tie it to the Re'eh specifically, the Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem, Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem?
No, not yet.
Right, and then it's the Re'eh, and that specific.
But ultimately, it's in terms of a fear, and you can't.
Right, and each time is a bit.
Yeah, okay. But
it's in Re'eh. So.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to hang up.